I just get you to say a few words so we can check your sound, Mr. Bienvenue à la 69e.
Welcome to the 69th meeting of the Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. We are now in a hybrid format in accordance with the order of the House of 23 June. Members are in person or via Zoom. Our transcription will be on the site of the House and the
Algonquin-Anishinaabe territory. For those participating virtually, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. You may speak in the official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting in French, English, and Inuktitut. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English or French, or Inuktitut, or English or French, sorry. Please select your language now. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately, and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person or in a committee room. Please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your mic will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verifications Officer. S'il vous plaît, adressez vos interventions à la présidence.
Please speak through the chair.
Slowly and clearly, when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on November 21st, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of land restitutions for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Today in our first panel, we welcome Mr. Clarence Manny Jules, Chief Commissioner for First Nations Tax Commission. Thanks for visiting us again. And Mr. Shannon Cumming, who is the legal counsel for the Northwest Territory Métis Nation, who is online. You will each have 5 minutes for introductory comments, and we'll begin with Mr. Jules. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Manny Jules, Chief Commissioner of the First Nations Tax Commission. I was also Chief of the Kamloops Indian Band from 1984 to 2000. Thank you for the invitation to appear before this committee as part of your Lands Back study, specifically the examination of economic growth opportunities possible within Canada. In that regard, I wish to present some proposals on how to speed up the land back process and ensure the returned lands are productive. But first, some historical context. In 1927, First Nations from British Columbia, some of whom were my relatives, traveled to Ottawa to argue that their title had been ignored and that they had been unlawfully dispossessed. The government responded by rejecting our claim and removing our ability to raise funds to defend our rights. As a result, it took 70 years before our title was recognized. We are dealing with the economic consequences of this unlawful dispossession. This is why I advocate for both the return of land and the fiscal powers attached to it. We have found in the past that it takes 10 times longer to facilitate an urban reserve than a municipal boundary expansion. Many of the lands we have allocated were not suitable for economic development or housing, as was promised under federal legislation. Our rights to access water, our riparian rights, were not properly considered. We have not adequately dealt with the reality that much of our lands are now held by third parties. I have some concrete solutions to address these issues. First, we need an orderly process for land expansions that accommodates population growth. My colleagues at the Lands Advisory Board are working on a new land title registry system. Their work should be enhanced by developing the First Nations institutional capacity to conduct our own assessments, appraisals, and land surveys on current and added lands. Today, returned lands must go first from the provincial crown to the federal crown, and then from the federal crown to reserve. The Lands Advisory Board initiatives and our proposed assessment and survey authority will allow lands to go directly from provincial title to First Nation title. Second, we need to ensure that the returned lands have the fiscal means necessary to become investment ready. The Tax Commission has demonstrated that when property tax and local revenue powers are in the First Nations' hands, it becomes much more valuable and generates more revenues and economic activities. This committee should support the ceding of more federal tax room to First Nations. This would include the federal excise tax on fuel, alcohol, cannabis, and tobacco. It could also include ceding the federal corporate tax income tax room to support the application of a proposed First Nations resource charge. These revenues would ensure that infrastructure and services can be applied on the returned lands. It will free First Nations from transfer dependency to respond more easily to changing opportunities and circumstances. This committee should support the development of an Indigenous trust that would help First Nations buy back lands that are now held by third parties. There is a model for this in the United States which should be closely examined. We should enable more regional economic cooperation between First Nations and local governments by ensuring the FNTC's protocol and service agreements are always available as necessary. I should note that our model agreements were recently used by the City of Winnipeg and Treaty 1 on the former Capion Barracks lands. Capion will be the largest urban reserve in Canadian history, and with the support of our models, one of the best service agreements in the country. The success of this approach needs to be publicized. This committee should advocate for the expansion of FNTC's capacity to support service agreement negotiations. This committee should also support the expansion of the Tulo Center of Indigenous Economics. An expanded Tulo Center would provide more accredited training, capacity to support interested First Nations and local governments. This would support better, faster service agreements and would help align First Nations and municipalities around the shared goals of enhanced investment, service efficiencies, improved infrastructure, and improving a regional's quality of life. To conclude, I believe these proposals would significantly speed up the land back process and provide opportunities to urban First Nation persons, and this would be a benefit to all Canadians. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jules. And Mr. Cumming, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. The Northwest Territory Métis Nation appreciates the opportunity to appear before you today. President Gary Bailey asked me to convey his kind regards. I'd like to give a brief history of the NWTMN. We are Indigenous Métis with Aboriginal rights to lands, resources, and governance throughout our traditional territory. We are Aboriginal people of the Mackenzie and Athabasca River basins, and that includes lands that we have traditionally used and occupied in Wood Buffalo National Park and in Thad-Den-A-Nene National Park Reserve. Our ancestors lived on these lands, which the Creator provided, and governed themselves according to our own laws and customs from time before memory. We are a distinct Métis nation within Canada. We have a right of self-determination. Our rights are protected under Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. In 1900, an adhesion to Treaty 8 was signed with Treaty Indians at Fort Resolution. Our Métis ancestors were there, but the Government of Canada failed to deal honorably with Métis rights. This legacy of differential treatment between Métis and Treaty Indians continues to this day. We regard it as a matter of fairness, equity, and justice, that reconciliation and redress for historic wrongs must be addressed through our NWTMN negotiating process. The NWTMN is comprised of Indigenous Métis members from Fort Smith Métis Council, Hay River Métis Government Council, and Fort Resolution Métis Council. Our members comprise a significant portion of the communities of Fort Smith, Hay River, Fort Resolution, and Yellowknife. NWTMN were full participants in the Dene Métis negotiations from the late 1970s to 1990. When the Dene and Métis leadership did not ratify the final agreement in 1990, some regions pursued regional land claim agreements, with the failed Dene Métis agreement becoming a template for regional negotiations. In August 1996, NWTMN, Canada, and the government of the Northwest Territories signed a framework agreement. An agreement in principle was signed in July 2015. Final agreement negotiations are underway. In May 2021, the Self-Government Framework Agreement was signed. These negotiations placed the NWTMN in the unique position of being the first standalone Métis Land Resources and Self-Government Agreement in Canada, a modern-day treaty. The NWTMN has chosen the path of good faith negotiations on lands, resources, and self-government as a means to achieve what we understand to be at the core of the land back principle. While the land back principle has gathered momentum recently in light of Article 28 of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which provides Indigenous peoples in part the right to redress by means that can include restitution, or when this is not possible, just, fair, and equitable compensation. We also note the importance of Article 26, which upholds Indigenous peoples' right to the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally used, owned, occupied, and the need for states to recognize such lands, resources, and territories. We were encouraged in May 2018 when Parliament passed Bill C-262 to harmonize Canada's laws with the UN Declaration. And further, the mandate letter of December 2021 from the Prime Minister to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General calls for the full implementation of the UN Declaration across government. NWTMN looks forward to Canada honoring the implementation of the Declaration in respect to Métis rights. We will continue to seek creative solutions to address the key outstanding issues for our negotiating process. And we can offer a few points based on our experience for the committee's consideration. Indigenous governments may choose different approaches to resolve fundamental questions of land, resources, and governance, and land back is one way of looking at the issues. The NWTMN, having chosen the path of good faith negotiations, is confident that our decision to negotiate can achieve what the land back issue seeks to achieve, a balance between the Crown's actions in respect of our traditional territory and the rights that Indigenous Métis will have recognized and affirmed in the modern treaty. Resolving the key outstanding issues for negotiations may require Canada to examine any impediments that stand in the way of concluding these critical processes and achieve reconciliation. For example, in our process, we have to deal with different ministries to address land issues. It could be INAC or Parks Canada. Although the Crown, as a matter of law, is indivisible, it does at times operate in silos. In summary, the resolution of longstanding Métis rights, title, and governance remains at the forefront of our approach to engaging with Canada and the government of the Northwest Territories. NWTMN has always preferred the path of good faith negotiations. And while the path has not been easy, we are approaching a final agreement. In our view, the modern day treaty we are seeking will achieve the principles that underpin the land back issue. The Métis government, with jurisdictions and authorities over its land and people, will provide us with what we need to move forward on the path of reconciliation with Canada. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Cumming. We'll proceed to our first round of questions, beginning with Mr. Zimmer for 6 minutes.
Thanks to our witnesses for coming today. Just wanted to say, especially to Manny, I know you've made many trips out here, really trying to bring economic prosperity to First Nations communities, so I applaud you for that. My question is, you mentioned the First Nations resource charge, and our leader has spoken about being positive about it and really seeking more feedback from Indigenous communities about what should it look like. But, being that this is, I think it's a brainchild of you, Manny, maybe for the folks watching, what is a First Nations resource charge? What is it?
In essence, a resource charge would help facilitate resource development and extraction throughout Canada. And this really came about after many years of thinking about how we could benefit from the resources that are exploited from our traditional territories, and in particular, my nation, the Shuswap Nation. And the conclusion I came to is that there has to be an orderly way to be able to get the federal and ultimately provincial governments to vacate tax room so that we would be able to occupy it and benefit from resource extraction so that we could put in badly needed infrastructure into our communities and participate in ways that are outside of the economic impact benefit agreements.
Just to expand on that a little bit more, Manny, you talked about the Shuswap Nation and benefiting directly from that. My experience has been some of the First Nations, Blueberry or Doig, up in my neck of the woods. It's always they have to go to, kind of on bended knee to the ministry and ask for certain key parts of infrastructure, whether it be water, sewer, or any kind of facilities that we just, expect to have in a normal, in communities. You shouldn't have to do make special requests for something so simple. But I think what my understanding is that this enables First Nations communities to sort of, take the bull by the horns and really take control of their own destiny this way. Maybe can you explain what would it look like in practice? Because Shuswap, I know you have a lot of trees around the area and a lot of forestry, but what would it look like in practice if this was to be a reality?
Well, again, just to reinforce the notion, a lot of this really solidified after Russia invaded Ukraine, and what I realized at that point in time is that Canada needed energy certainty, food certainty, and the only way to accomplish that would be to deal directly with First Nations that are impacted. So when you're dealing with Doig and Blueberry, a lot of that is going to be Site C Dam and other energy extractions. And so by participating fully, you not only participate as entrepreneurs, but also as governments. And as a government, you're going to be able to utilize those revenues and build better infrastructure that lasts longer, using our own jurisdictions to be able to have our people stand up on their own.
So getting down into the details a little bit. So, First Nations community X, or even your own community, if this First Nations resource charge was to be implemented, what would that practice look like?
What we've suggested is that the federal government vacate federal corporate tax room so that First Nations would be able to benefit from that. That would go directly to First Nations. And we're also looking at...
Essentially as a revenue stream.
That's exactly true.
Yeah.
And what we would be looking at from the interface with provincial governments is they would be hopefully doing the same thing. And the discussions we're having right now with the province of Manitoba is providing a registry for mining, et cetera. And that would also benefit First Nations because they would be able to partake in the developments right from the ground level, if you will.
And from your perspective, Manny, and I alluded to it, I guess, but from your experience with First Nations communities in BC, obviously the fact that you've come up with the idea, you see that it's necessary. Just maybe give an example of where you've seen some communities that lack revenue and lack resources.
Well, the obvious community always that's talked about is Attawapiskat. Remote community had an agreement with De Beers Mining for diamonds. Couldn't fulfill all of the jobs that were available, and a lot of that is because they just didn't have the expertise locally, and didn't have all of the wherewithal to be able to take full advantage of the opportunities. And you see that repeated over and over right across the country. One of the things that we did in Kamloops with the Kamloops division of the Shuswap is we looked at the development called New Gold, and we became a partner in the development. We share in some of the provincial tax revenues. Some individual members have become millionaires as a result of providing services not only to the mining corporation but also to the communities. And so there are ways that you can actually begin to deal with the issues, but a lot of it is because of legislation that I referred to dating from 1927. That legislated us out of the economy. What we have to turn our attention to and what your committee has to look at is ways and means of getting rid of those legislative barriers so that First Nations can fully participate in the Canadian economy.
And I see Chief Louie and other examples that this formalizes kind of what they've already been doing to a certain extent. by applying resource revenue to their communities.
That's true. One of the litmus tests that I always look at is, can you take this to the bank? And with impact benefit agreements, they're finite. They can come and go depending on the negotiations. But if you get, federal room, tax room, you can go to the bank with it. You can use the First Nations Finance Authority, and it actually puts a lot of the discussions that the Canadian government and provincial governments and territorial governments have had with First Nations into practice.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. We'll now move to Mr. McLeod for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Manny for coming back to present again, and welcome to Shannon Cummings from Northwest Territories. I listened with interest to your presentation, Shannon, and I think you covered all bases, except I didn't hear you talk about some of the concerns that I hear from other Indigenous governments about the lack of availability of federal negotiators. And they point to this as one of the major reasons the negotiations on land claims and self-government has taken so long, because there were so many cuts historically to Department of Indian Affairs. And in some cases, we're down to maybe a day and a half of actual negotiations. The negotiators travel from Ottawa, get as far as Yellowknife one day, then maybe get to the regional center next day, start negotiating on Wednesday, and Thursday noon they're starting to pack up and head back south. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit of if that's an issue with the NWT Métis Nation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member from NWT for that question. It's true that there are issues with availability of federal negotiators or even territorial negotiators. We've observed, for example, speaking about the GNWT, that there's been quite a bit of churn within their system, and so negotiators go off the file, and these are tremendously complex files, as the member knows. They, these agreements are 30 to 40 full chapters. The implementation agreements run past 400 pages. These are incredibly complex treaties that have been negotiated. And for a new negotiator to come onto the file and come up to speed takes a long time. And so over the many years of our process, we have seen the challenges when new negotiators come onto the file. And secondly, the other point that the member made was that they don't have the number of days to really make progress at a table. In our view, 1.5 days, you're really just getting started. Most negotiations, given the distances, ideally should have like 3 good days of actual negotiations, not a half day, starting and then a day in the middle. It just doesn't create those winning conditions that you need to close these deals. And, while we appreciate, the hard work that's been done in systems to bring these treaties to the finish line, we really think it would benefit if there would be more dedication by governments to ensuring that they've got the resources and the human resources they need and the time resources to fully engage at these tables to deal with these fundamental issues. Thanks again for the question.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shannon. The NWT has 15 tables where discussions and negotiations are going on. And I hear lots from the different Indigenous governments, including
Point of order,
the
Chair.
Métis Nation.
Sorry, Mr. McLeod. Point of order.
I think we can see the bells ringing. Maybe we can get unanimous consent to carry on a little longer, just so we can keep the questions going.
Sure. Do we have unanimous consent to go 10 minutes into the bells? Online, Lori?
Is
20
it 30
into the bells?
Is it 30? 30? Okay. I'm
right.
good with 20 into the bells.
Okay. Thank you. We will proceed. Sorry, Mr. McLeod.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And back to my question for Shannon. I've heard lots from your president, Gary Bailey, on different issues, and he's come out with a number of suggestions over the year. So I wanted to know, you have your time here in front of committee. If you could just maybe run some of the suggestions that you think the government of Canada can do to make the negotiation process more efficient and effective.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the member being interrupted by ringing bells. I think last time his line fell out, so you're a real trooper to hang in that way. Thanks for the question. We have had a hard look at what it would take to create conditions for success. And one of the things that became very clear was there was a minister's special representative in the mid-aughts, like around 2014, 2015, made a report. And the minister's special representative, one of the things that he recommended, and we agree fully with that, is that some of the old mandates that have been around maybe since the 1970s or 1980s are really, really outdated. I mean, they are just so far in the past as to be really unhelpful to getting things to the finish line. So more flexibility in mandates for the government negotiators would really be helpful. If you look at the agreements throughout the Mackenzie Valley, up and down the valley from the Inuvialuit to the Gwich'in, Satu, and now to the Dehcho, the Clecho, and us in the South Slave, every agreement has always changed a little bit from the one prior to it. So yes, they're similar, but in each case, the negotiators have found some ways to put in certain benefits into each of these agreements that help drive their communities forward. For the Clecho agreement, north of Great Slave Lake, one of the big things that they were able to successfully negotiate was a strategic economic development investment fund that had never been done in an agreement north of 60, but the Clecho made it happen. It was only, I think, around $5 million, which is, not a huge chunk of change given the hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. But it was really key to bringing that agreement to the finish line. And so what would really be helpful is when a negotiating party gets close to the finish line, it's like being 95% up Mount Everest. Like, you've come so far, and it's been a hard pull, but you're up in the death zone. You can only be up there so long. You've either got to hit the summit and get down safely, or you're going to die up there. And so what we've learned, especially watching some of the previous large processes like the Clecho agreement, is that if the minister's office and the federal system in particular really has their full attention on that file, that's going to get completed. You absolutely need a signal from the system that this government intends to conclude its business and get this file to the finish line. We've seen it in every successful agreement north of 60. We would love to see it for ours. So thanks to the member for the question.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. And bienvenue, Monsieur.
Welcome, Mr. Savard Tremblay. Over to you, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to the committee for welcoming. I'm replacing my colleague, Marlene, who is not here because of the terrible forest fires in her area, in her region. I'm very happy to be here for the first time in this committee as a member of a First Nations Wendat. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you to the witnesses for their very interesting presentations with regard to restitution of lands. My first question will be for both witnesses, and you can take turns. With regard to reconciliation and economic reconciliation, and as I understand it, is that what can this new management of the territory, according to what we've heard, identity, culture, language, these are part of these negotiations. Could the witnesses give us examples of concrete examples of what restitution of lands and management by Indigenous groups could bring to other areas, for example, natural sites and other communities? And is it possible to harmonize these to improve social and economic life?
The translation was just a little bit behind. There's quite a number of examples right across the country. When we talk about economic reconciliation as it applies to lands, one of the examples I gave was in the city of Winnipeg with the Capion properties. That development alone will translate to literally billions of dollars for the regional economy. The development at Satina by Calgary, again, $1 billion development because First Nations have got not only the land but also the jurisdiction over those lands. And another example is in close to downtown Vancouver with the Squamish First Nation. They're doing a multi-tower residential development, again, over $1 billion. And so you've got that kind of a scale of potential right across the country. And of course, on the lower end of the spectrum, you've got communities that really are, some by the city of Merritt, have lost virtually all of their land as a result of flooding and forest fires. And so it's a matter of rebuilding those properties and giving them the tools that are necessary to redevelop their lands without complete dependence on the federal and provincial governments. Of course, I believe in interdependence, but what we need with First Nation governments is to have their own sources of revenues, their own jurisdictions over their lands, and in order to facilitate that, we have to be able to have our own land title system. So under the present system, under the Canadian Constitution right now, Indian reserves means whose title is vested in His Majesty for the use and benefit of a band of Indians. And so that's antiquated. That's from the 19th century. What we have to do is put that in our colonial past and look forward to a future where First Nations have got jurisdiction and have got land title that our ancestors have always talked about.
Mr. Cumming?
Yeah, thank you to the member for that question. Looking at the examples in the Northwest Territories, one of the things that comes to mind is what's been negotiated in the agreements up there is resource royalty sharing. So the government shares revenues from resources with the Indigenous governments in the regions. And that's been a really successful way to generate revenue for Indigenous governments that are emerging, some of them with settled treaties and some like ours who have not yet finalized their treaties. So it's a really good example, although albeit a bit of a small one, but a really good example of economic reconciliation in action. There's no issue of title to the land because it may be even something as broad as a generalized interest in the resource royalties. And so while a negotiating party may have its own lands to deal with, they also have the possibility of generating revenues from the resources that are been developed up and down the Mackenzie Valley. So whether you're in the Mackenzie Delta or halfway down the Mackenzie River, or like us in the very southern part of the NWT, there's an opportunity to benefit from mineral resource development, and everybody shares in that. So thank you to the member for the question.
I'm going to come back to Mr. Jules. Could you tell us a bit about what's happening in the United States? You talked about an Indigenous trust. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
I think that that's something that we have to seriously consider, and some of this applies to in environmental groups purchasing properties on behalf of Indigenous tribes in the United States, ranchers that want to turn over some of their former lands to tribal lands. So there are, and then what I envision in a trust would be a legislated model, federally legislated, that individuals would be able to get a tax credit for making contributions to. It would allow individuals to, if you will, turn over their lands and properties to individual First Nations. It would help facilitate in a lot of cases, there's a lot of hard feelings between the neighbors, and that would help alleviate that by creating an atmosphere of goodwill and cooperation. And I think that one of the ones that I'm most familiar with is the land board out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they help facilitate a lot of tribal groups to purchase lands back and to help negotiate all of the ins and outs, because it is pretty complex when you're dealing with an individual that has one set of appraisals and another set of expectations. And how do you bring the partners to the table to have an agreement that everyone would be able to live with in the future? But what I actually envision is a piece of legislation that the federal government would pass, whose responsibility is to work with First Nations here in this country. Of course, part of that would be looking at the examples in the United States, but that's the primary area that I would look to help reconstitute lands that were ultimately taken away from us. In some cases, having willing partners and willing sellers.
Merci, Monsieur Savage-Tremblay.
Thank you very much.
You have 6. Ms. Sidlow?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm also very happy to see you again, Manny. And it's a pleasure to be meeting with you virtually, as well as Shannon. Regarding land back, the subject of land back is a very important subject, as we all know. And for the purposes of mining companies who are seeking to profit on Indigenous lands and being Indigenous people, our lands have been taken away from us, have been stolen away from us, and we need to restitute our lands back. So I have a question. The duty to consult is too weak, in my opinion. There has to be a better approach to strengthen the consultation processes, as well as the rights. Do you agree the free entry system has to change? Do you agree with me within the Indigenous jurisdictions, and for us to be informed immediately, not after? Manny, I'd like you go first, and then Shannon second.
I think this is a very critical question. One of the things that I dealt with when I was chief, and this was an issue that was handed down to me from former chiefs, we call this land that was taken away from us the hole in the middle of the table. And that land was taken away from us by the provincial government in the 1800s. We ended up purchasing that property when I was chief in the 1990s, so it took virtually 100 years to resolve it. And one of the arguments that the federal and provincial governments put forward is because they gave us gifts, that was adequate consultation, and that the Indians were happy, and that meant that we had given up the land. In our community, we know and understand fully what surrender means. And obviously, we didn't surrender those lands nor those interests. And one of the things that's critically important when we start to deal with the whole question of land back is not only the comprehensive claims processes, but the specific claims processes, and expediting those processes, because a lot of those lands were taken away from us under circumstances that ultimately were suspect, because they were predicated on the fact that we couldn't raise money to defend ourselves, we couldn't have the legal advisors at our disposal to defend our rights. And so these are issues that I think are separate and apart from a lot of the specific claims and therefore comprehensive claims issues that we face across the country. And so when we talk about the notions that there should be a higher standard of consultations, absolutely right. Because First Nations, we had these rights taken away from us by none other than Duncan Campbell Scott in 1927, who was the Department of Indian Affairs agent at that time. He worked for 50 years under that department, had 15 hours of presentations to a committee just like this, where my leaders had 15 minutes. Under any circumstances, that's wrong.
Mr. Cunning?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member for the question. The member raises a really important consideration for any Indigenous government that's either negotiating or implementing a modern-day treaty. Some of the limitations around the duty to consult is that at the end of the day, the government still may make a decision that's contrary to the interests of the Indigenous government, despite them having laid out their case eloquently, emphatically, and respectfully. The decision is still taken to proceed. And that, in our view, falls a little bit short of what the whole notion in the UN Declaration about the idea of free and prior informed consent. And to me, that seems like a further step down the road to reconciliation than just that bare duty to consult that's shaped by common law, but at the end of the day may leave the Indigenous government in a situation where they didn't agree strongly with the decision that was taken, and they felt like they had no recourse. I don't think that is conducive to reconciliation. And so one of the things that is another complicating factor is if you've got a huge mineral development, for example, a large mine, it's going to be very difficult to claw the land back. That land is, the interest in land has been granted. Government is reluctant.
Madame la Présidente, problème d'interprétation.
Oui, merci beaucoup. We're just having a technical issue, Mr. Cumming. If you could just hold on a minute. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Cumming. It's just a matter of your internet quality, I guess. So you can continue to answer the question, and if it doesn't work, we'll just have to get you to provide a written response, if that's okay. So please continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the internet quality is fairly tricky in the north at the best of times, and I don't think the forest fires are helping. So we will endeavor to provide further written submissions on not just on this particular matter, but generally on some of our suggestions to help address some of the issues around land back. So I was talking about free and prior informed consent. The only other point I wanted to make, if I can be heard, is that there may be creative solutions to deal with a situation where a mining company has a huge development. It's too late to, claw the land back. There may not be enough benefits through something like an impact benefits agreement. But, the negotiating party would not be well disposed to saying, well, we're going to settle this agreement and we'll just, let that one slide by. There may be some off-ramps that the government can consider to deal with the issues around resource royalties, for example, or employment provisions, separate from the treaty negotiations or treaty implementation. If there's a way to deal with some of these outside of the treaty process, then the treaty process itself should not be used as a means to extinguish any of those rights that still exist on behalf of Indigenous governments with respect to lands and resources. So all we're suggesting is that there may be creative ways to allow for these issues to be resolved not necessarily through the treaty process, but through something different, and that will achieve the economic reconciliation. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, and it actually worked out quite well. I think we still had interpretation. We are going to have to suspend. We've got a vote in the House. So thank you so much for your testimony, Mr. Cumming and Mr. Jules. It's always a pleasure to see you. We very much appreciate your testimony. Thank you very much. And we will suspend.